Welcome all to the Liminal Collective. My name's Andy Walsh. I've been very fortunate to have a career spent watching extraordinary people do extraordinary things and listening and learning from them over the last 30 years has really guided how we think about human performance and sort of the background of this conversation. Today I'm joined by Benny Popven and Jürgen Heitmann. Gentlemen, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good afternoon. It's great to be here. And, I think one of the great opportunities, like Andy says, I had the privilege over the last 30 plus years of being in the military and working around some amazing individuals, being on some teams that have done some incredible things and living in a culture of excellence. And I think having that privilege of being in those environments and being able to now step out of that space and share those observations, those personal learnings, and those learnings of others to folks, and to really kind of up the dynamic of where we're taking humanity and those who want to do the hardest things on the edge. So I'm really happy to be here and appreciate the opportunity to share some of those learnings that I've observed.
Thanks, Andy and Jürgen, for the invites. My name is Ben. I come from the world of performing arts. Background was in gymnastics, and then somehow through the years transferred into the Cirque du Soleil community, where I was fortunate enough to perform on multiple stages and meet some great athletes, turning into artists, turning into coach. So going through this transformational process where you enter at a certain person and you exit and you keep going, you keep learning something new about the environment and about yourself and about others. So Andy and Jürgen and I, with other individuals in Liminal Collective, this is one of our things that we love to discover, to explore more, and to constantly learn. How do we get better at ourselves? How does a better you equals a better at what you do? And we're constantly learning, we're constantly expanding our circle in order to try to get this new insights, whether it's through technology or other communities or other individuals that are exciting or on the same path as us, to kind of explore the edges of performances. And how do we adapt, and how can we help one individual at a time, and create a better place, a better humanity, a better community. So I'll pass it back to you, Andy.
No, thanks, gentlemen. So this is a three-part series, as we shared, informed by our collective experiences over the years. And this is where we're going to talk about sort of what Benny just mentioned, better at you, and how that informs and supports better at what you do. So we look forward to having this conversation as we move forward today. Welcome back to part three of Better at You and then Better at What You Do. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about things we've touched on in the previous episodes, which is the idea of these challenging or adverse environments and how they help us as humans evolve. And I think also a lot of our toolkit, as you've heard us mention, is centered around these experiential training evolutions that do challenge you outside of what you're normally exposed to. So with that, we're going to dig into the conversation today. So one of the earliest things I learned at college was when we were sort of studying human performance, was that the body adapts, but it typically adapts to some form of stimulus. And that stimulus is usually something that overloads or exceeds current capabilities, so that the body then adapts, improves, and you get better. There's lots of fancy terms for it, but the idea being, if you're not running or exercising and you start to jog around the block, you'll get fitter. But after a few weeks of that stimulus is no longer challenging to the system, and you need to run around the block twice to get fit and improve your fitness. So this idea that the body only adapts really when it's challenged, we've learned over the years, applies to every system, both physically, psychologically, mentally, cognitively, even spiritually. And I think, so if you think of that model as a sort of anchor for sort of the way we design challenges and training evolutions to help people navigate that, it's sort of also drawn from our name, sort of liminality. It was sort of dragged out of the work done on the sort of rites of passage in the ancient sort of cultures that developed these very challenging passages for youth to go through to sort of establish them as one understanding of themselves, but also show them how they could contribute and where they could contribute to society in sort of the original high performance models, if you like. So I think a lot of what we've learned over the years has sort of been sort of, and coming full circle in many ways, to this idea that can we create training challenges, training evolutions that stress or challenge the human? If it's done in the physical realm, obviously you get fitter and stronger. If it's done in the cognitive realm, obviously resilience builds. And then even more recently in the work with our spiritual advisor, Reverend Sue Phillips, sort of how do you put people through that sort of values and meanings sort of question of sort of looking at themselves through that lens so they can think about how what's important to them, what's important to their being as another challenge, and have them grow and evolve from that. So, I think just to kick off today's conversation, this is, I think maybe Jürgen, you had a artificially designed sort of ritual or a liminality moment when you went for selection into the Navy, and that really, the principles are the same, even though it was applied obviously for different reasons.
Yeah, I think there's so much there when you step into a place of fear and anxiety, and stepping into an environment of going through the schoolhouse and special operations, of the fear of failure, the fear of poor leadership if you're put in a leadership position. How you take care of your teammates, and I always keep coming back to that principle, and the failure of compassion and empathy, and this sense of courage, in the sense of doing the right thing for others. And I think as we stepped into that space in a selection environment, when you're in fear, and everyone's in fear in some sense, you're going into a space of liminality. You're going into a space you're going to go through in one sense or the other. It can be to the extremes of combat, or close to death, or in different environments that are in that space. But there can also be the fear that you're developing in your mind, and how you reflect and respond through that space. And I think coming through that long duration, which was actually pretty short at that time frame, of constant pressure testing of your resilience and your grit, and how you deal with that fear and anxiety and performance in that space, was an amazing learning experience. But actually, Andy, I'll take it back to probably all of us, is, kids growing up, as a kid growing up and always wanting to be out in nature and space, was probably the first critical teacher for me, and environment that really pressure tested all those principles that we think about as a teacher of peak performance. And you think about what you learn in those spaces of, one, how small you are, and how you seek out that explorer's mindset and make those hard decisions and deal with the outcomes, because you're on your own, or you're with a few buddies or kids. And even if that's 20 minutes out in the woods from your backyard, or as you're growing older, going through expeditions in different spaces, whether it's in the ocean and the environment there, or in cold mountainous environments where you can't control your environment, and you're learning how to adapt, how to really be humble and respectful of the environment. You're building that discipline. You're learning about decision making and risk mitigation, so to speak, or the outcomes of pretty critical risks, and that perception of risk. Do you see it as an opportunity? Do you see it as you're falling back into your guard? Are you getting super narrow, or are you looking at different creative ways to step through that risk and get to the other side? It's probably the best environment to really understand adaptability and agility in those spaces. So, we always at least I always come back to nature as probably one of the greatest teachers of performance, and how you look at training and discipline in those environments, but more so about humility, and really being just a speck, in this greater environment. And then as we grow through these experiences, we apply those principles. Again, we learn back there as we reflect back and really step into those and put it into a structured environment. So, I'll stop there and turn over to Ben from his reflections as he goes through, but then we'll come back to, I think, some of the principles of dealing with long duration, chaos, complexity, those kind of environments that can really affect both, your cognitive well-being, but also, the physiology of how you're developing in this environment of performance and obstacles and in complex environments. And it really is an opportunity when you step into it with a smile on your face. And there's so many opportunities of learning in that space and some principles in there that I'll share a little bit later. Ben, I'll turn over to you.
Yeah, and then on your opportunities thread, obviously we all learn really when you fail, right? But so how do you practice to fail in little bits so people can learn? Because I think we live in a completely different society nowadays than we did 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Things move so fast. The expectation and the pressure for all the youth and the kids to kind of deliver at a certain speed and accuracy and constantly fit it in or come up with something new. So I think if we have to be able to create this kind of okay and celebrate these failings, but have a network of the proper support that is in the way. Because when somebody fails, the sooner that you understand that, but you're able to be taken back up and like, all right, cool. Let's look at what happened. Let's make it more like a lessons learned versus pointing the finger, because everybody likes to celebrate a win and they don't want to talk about losses. One thing that you do when you get to a certain elite level is that you actually look more at your losses than your wins. Because you're like, all right, I got this good. Why, how, and how can I learn from this in order for that not to happen again? So, coming from COVID, obviously the entertainment industry got hit huge, especially Vegas. Everything got caught down. Cirque closed their shop, everything. So, there was a point where like, okay, what's going to be the future of this, and how does entertainment, especially live entertainment in Vegas, come back? And there's the different camps. There's this camp that people actually there was 3 different camps. There's the camp that people that just kind of stayed still and said, "We're going to wait till they turn the switch back on, and I'll come back as I'm used to doing." Fine. There's the camp of people, completely like, "Oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm freaking out, and this is the end of the world." And then you had the other camp, which is actually a little smaller, but like, all right, how do I reimagine myself, my craft, my environment in order to be prepared? So whenever there is a glimpse of hope or a glimpse of the things opening up, I can jump on that and be the first in line with this transformed energy, and vibe where I can do my craft, or at least a version of it that's been updated, upgraded to fit the need now. So it was very interesting, and a lot of people here, like smaller circus, a smaller entertainment company that were able to open sooner than later because of the capacity. People jumped on that, and they changed a lot of the stuff. It's funny enough, they changed to laughter. Let's change to like a little bit of comic relief coming from this, almost 2 years of just like being pounded down, and squished on, and then all of a sudden, like, what's the best way to come up? And I'm sure, Jürgen, I've heard you say that before, like in the craziest environment, somebody would crack a joke, and it's just like, how do we use laughter or comedy in order to kind of get you back and spin things off? So I think laughter opportunity was definitely some of the things that we need to grasp on, because everybody will have their own idea and everybody has their own obstacles, and certain people react quicker if they hit a wall, if they have to come through, then other people kind of stay still. So this thing of fight, flight, or what's the other thing? Like stay, fight, or flight, and I think that's what we tried to do. And to earlier on when we talked about how do you get these people to get better at their craft? Well, we're definitely not, they're the expert at their own crafts. We can help them to understand and how to hit an obstacle and to, learn from past experience or certain things in order to pick themselves up as themselves first. And once they figure that out, then they can back into the craft with a different mindset, a bit more creativity into it. So I think there's the lesson of be able to pivot and to switch an obstacle or a challenge or a failure into a lesson learned and get back on the track sooner is an edge that I felt that we did help some few individuals in the past, and this is something that we should definitely focus on, especially with the fragility of the youth and the kids, because this is one aspect where I'm really scared of, because everything has evolved so quick in education and environment where they, again, not everybody, but major source, haven't really adapted to this. And then we find ourselves kind of where we are now with social media and depression, at every corner. And you're like, wow, okay. So anyway, so that's kind of, coming back to understanding failing is okay. And they just need, the sooner they can do this and the sooner that they can have the proper support and understand that, hey, you learned something, move on, versus, oh my God, just a mindset will have two different outcomes.
No, I think obviously both of you spoke to the idea, and what when you both discuss the idea of training and support, I think that's something that's often overlooked. It's the idea that you do need to, adversity on its own can be a bit of a toss of a coin, and I think our other colleague, Dr. Pereira, puts it pretty bluntly. He said, you either come out of adversity with a growth, I learned something from it, or you come out in terms of suffering. And even in any given population, it's kind of a third will come out going, wow, I'm going to struggle with this moving forward. A third come out and go, oh, I've learned something, and a third sort of languish in the middle. But if you can, as we know, if you can educate and train, I think a lot of the parts of the puzzle that people don't see with a lot of the work we do is we spend hours supporting and training people on the science of threat, the science of stress, the science of adversity, how to manage risk, psychological tools to sort of navigate complex and difficult times, how to slow your heart rate, breathing, etc. All those tools will give you a much better chance of navigating a challenge in a way that'll let you come out and grow from it. And I think, as you brought up, Betty, what we're seeing now from our lens is this idea that, the one thing, I think it's the Harvard study on happiness, the one thing that gives people a greater chance of success in facing adversity is having one close friend or a community that you can really depend on, who've got your back. And that makes a huge difference on your ability to go through tough and challenging times. And so what is the first thing we did with COVID is we locked everyone up and separated everybody from their community. And then you laid on top of that, the challenges with the political climate, the social injustice rampant, more recently, wars and challenges globally, and then climate on top of everything else. It's just been never ending. And I think this is something that people haven't been trained for and haven't been educated to. So again, what can we give as a tool? Is make sure you're connected to your community. Learn that that these things that are coming at you are not normal and are a threat and are a challenge, and make sure you recognize them for that and share your story with your friend. And also, look at all the different tools of practice of growth mindset, and how to breathe and slow, mindfulness and the tools in that space that can allow you some basic tools to navigate. But I think the world's gotten a big of a culture shock with respect to the importance of human performance and how it can help them nowadays. So I think it's a great conversation to be having.
Yeah, Andy, it's and we've talked about this before, just the environment over the last couple of years and what that has done, both in personal loss of community, loss of friends, and just it's really kind of made you look inward, back to kind of pressure testing your ethos. And part of it, in your mindset of being in this state of suffering or challenge, is simply being grateful to be alive in the moment. And I'll take that from our world in some of the really hard spaces, and being surrounded by others at times, and sometimes not being surrounded by others, but being in that moment and being very present, and really stepping into a space that really allows you to make hard decisions, brings you back to what allows you to make hard decisions, which is your personal ethos, your convictions, your personal creed. And it allows you these opportunities to really step into spaces you normally don't get a chance to do. Or again, how are you, a great servant leader? How are you helping out your community? How are you helping out others within your family and close friends? These were all opportunities that were brought out over the last couple of years that might not have happened, in certain spaces. And the second, third order effects are about growth and really reflecting on your actions and authentically thinking about how you help your community back to those tribal principles that have been missing for years. And sometimes it takes, very kind of catastrophic events to bring that out. And we come back to all the way back to the beginning of ancient wisdoms and tribal, community principles of taking care of each other. And that accountability and responsibility that is missing out in the environment at times. And I think that comes back to the principles of performance and back to first principles again. And, in those hard environments, the courage to do the right thing, the courage and the compassion and the human aspect of people is brought out that maybe normally wouldn't be brought out. And it's for your teammates, whether you're accountable for them because they're under your, watch, so to speak. Is it for yourself where you don't dwell on that, but you're always thinking about others around you and how you can learn or help or improve their environment or the community, and then also sometimes in our world, we look at it from our opponent or the enemy and how you balance that perception and that empathy and sense of what you're doing and the second, third outcomes of you step into these spaces and that respect of culture and having a deeper definition of empathy and compassion with these folks. So, again, it's how you step into it. What's your mindset and attitude of stepping into places that are uncontrollable. And those are the things, and we always talk about this, what can you control in these environments? How you prepare yourself to get into that, i.e. training or discipline or experiences, but your attitude and mindset of stepping into it. And I think, when you step into these spaces that you can't control, it's always just an amazing opportunity to learn about yourself and grow. And I know we know that, and everyone says that, but to really feel that and reflect on how you felt about that, how you really looked into that perspective and that compassion and really pressure tested that is an amazing opportunity that we rarely get.
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. It's the idea of just coming full circle to looking at yourself and what's important to you and taking a moment right now in this time because things are challenging and the world is shifting quickly. And I think what people should also is the awareness and recognition that it's not normal. We're not potentially trained for it, and being aware that you can, it's hard, but you can look at it and say, okay, what can I learn about myself in this time? And it's what's really hard, I think, for many people is the idea that these are the big global sort of threats and challenges that are sort of ubiquitous. But on any given day, the family might be, challenges in your family. You might have gone through a divorce. You may, as an athlete, you may have blown your knee. All these things that happen to you personally layer on top of all these global and sort of ubiquitous threats. And I think that's why, again, this conversation, our perspective is one of many, but awareness, understand that it's not normal, educate yourself in whatever that is, and then think about the tools that are available to bring to bear. And that can start with, as you said, you're just writing down what's really important to me and being, practicing a little gratitude. We know that is a starting point. And if you can do it with a friend or someone in your community, then that really helps you out. So, thanks both of you for sharing all that. It's great stuff. Well, I think we've talked a lot today about looking back and what we see happening right now in the world and how some of these tools may apply. But, what's also exciting for us, I think, as a community is where human performance is going, where it's evolving. And I think it has a classic yin and yang. There's a good and a bad in our lens of what we see happening. I think what's exciting, and we've talked about this a lot internally, is this notion that the tools and technologies are accelerating at such a rate that we're getting insights into the human condition that we've never had. And there's obviously deeply technical and deeply scientific, but we're learning. We're in a point in time where we're starting to know things about how to train, support, understand human performance in ways that we've never had. So I think that gets us excited. But I think we're all pretty adamant in the fact that technology comes with a cost, and I think that cost is that as technology evolves and the big companies have roadmaps for their technical advancement, the human in the loop could be left aside. So I think we're seeing our greatest opportunity is flipping that narrative. It's sort of, I call it the paradox of technology and human performance. And we are now thinking about even more deeply focusing on the human in the equation, what a human are uniquely situated to do. And I think in the human machine teaming as one example, the idea of doubling down on what those skill sets, creativity, compassion, grace, fortitude, courage, empathy, helping accelerate our abilities in these areas that the machine cannot replicate, and letting the machine take over all the heavy lifting. And I think that in itself leads us to this idea that creativity, again back to where we started, is uniquely human, but allowing the machine and the agents to go and do all the heavy lifting to give us time to think more deeply and train on these elements is obviously getting us all excited. And I think for many of the people listening, it can be seen as a threat, the machine taking my job per se. But I think the flip of that is, if the machine takes the busy part of the work, what does it free you up to learn and grow and understand about yourself and then spend time on? So, I just set that as a primer, but obviously we both have strong thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'd say, the fun thing is almost like back to basics. It's like, how can we somehow bring fun and challenging and through basics? And when I talk basic, I mean like human, the connection that we have, creativity. So it's kind of like almost have this better understanding of who you are, really tap into this, and then go right to the lab or the kitchen, however you want to call it, where you start mixing and cross-pollinating groups or people or trends or that really haven't really not thought of meshing, And so in my world, where you can create like, entertainment and experiences, now you add tech, you add AR to it, you add, different style of dance, meeting a different culture. They just, the possibility are endless. And I think now more than ever, I feel people are a little bit more open in order to do this. With the pandemic, actually kind of put a pause on things, and I think a lot of people start rethinking. Big companies are rethinking how their work ethics and workspace. How does that look like? Where everybody start bringing a little bit more environment, like how to, what's the best way to do a board meeting? Is it in a white room with neon lights on top, or is it maybe outside in the garden and then dream and all these things. So I love these opportunities and these possibilities and of the future. But like, I think if we can somehow just get the youth and the kids excited and, just sprinkle a little bit of HP into that and get them curious and then watch them grow. Like if they have the right tools and the right assets and the right environment to thrive and to think and to create and to do mistakes and to, tackle and challenge their imaginations, become storytellers. I think like that comes back for me in basic, like you said, Jürgen, ancient wisdom, the thing that connects everybody: stories, food, music, and dance. That's, anyways, that'll be my bias, but that seems to be the golden recipe that we can thrive on, because when you meet together, when you eat together, you break bread together, you create this conversation. And then all of a sudden you start yourself finding into what we've talked about, listening and sharing, which is like two premise of understanding who you are and getting better understanding who your team are. But we create an environment for this. And then all of a sudden you're sharing cultures, you're sharing spices, foods, and then you make these plans. Let's try to do this. Let's go with this. So I think the inspiring for me is like, let's try to, let technology go, because there's no hell in way we can catch on to it. But let's just, as this goes, use it to your point, Andy, where you said of like, hey, if technology is going to alleviate all these tasks that I don't like to do, I'm not good at, to do, great. then that opens a whole other, space and time for you to get creative and to rethink and reimagine yourself, your group, your people, your family, your dreams. And then ideally get a few, big thinkers that want to do some moonshots and really radically change the world. And whether it's with our ocean, the space, the environment, the forests, just communities. So that's for me, that's what's really inspiring. And I think there's something there we just need to put on pause and not try to catch something we can't catch, and just tap into your your present state and appreciate what you have, who you have, and then start telling your own stories and then go from there.
Yeah, I'll double down, on the red thread of creativity. I think still that's the space, as you both mentioned, that's going to be so interesting as processes and systems change. The creativity has to change too. So you're also, looking at how your instincts are evolving, and how you make decisions off your instincts, and that nuance versus algorithms. What's given to you either through AI or big data and machine direction. There's something about those instinctive instincts that have come from experiences and those creative spaces that allows you to pivot at a moment and just kind of just go from there, and I think that's going to be fun. The other thing I'm really excited about is the future of neuroscience, and where neuroscience is looking into the future of what can be done, both with technology enablement, but also this constant research and exploration. And we're lucky to have some amazing neuroscientists, within our crew. And whenever I listen to them speak, it's just so curious of what is being done, and how the mind is evolving or can be evolved or adapted to some of these environments. And to me, that opens up windows of opportunity to edges of human potential that has never even been, well, maybe it's been thought about, but never thought about as being very practical. And I think, Andy, you always emphasize that when I hear you speak on the spaces of where we can be going in the future of human potential, that how we think about moonshots. And I think moonshots and the truly never been done or can't be done now, but maybe in 7 years, is an exciting space to start exploring, because we're redefining that space through science, through research, and then just through the top 1% that are always constantly thinking about that progressive space to do things. And that's what really excites me about the future of human performance and human factors in those spaces.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the tech is going to open up opportunities, but as you said, and I think in ways we can't even imagine, and the brain being a frontier of performance, it's just fascinating. And we know nothing in retrospect, and relatively speaking, and Benny, but I think it comes back to that raw human connection, which I think has become more profoundly obvious in the last couple of years. It's just getting back to community, friends, and making sure that we accelerate that part of our being as much as the technology. So again, back to that paradox, I think the evolution of machines and acceleration of tech will give us the opportunity to become more deeply engaged in what we stand for as an individual, as a team, and then what we can contribute. But, I get inspired about all that, but I also think just in broad terms, the fact that there's now a conversation online on human performance, when we started our careers, human performance was just this thing that, athletes or the military did. And I think this broadening of the acceptance of what understanding human capability and understanding human potential is now across as diverse a field as surgeons and peace builders and gamers and programmers and inclusive of athletes and entrepreneurs. To me, that's super inspiring, because I think that just means we're going to have so much more to learn. And I think importantly, to the big picture, for our listeners, we're currently working on a program of sort of how do we bring top climate leaders and scientists and train them to be adaptable and lead effectively in challenging, dynamic, chaotic, aggressive, adversive environments. I think as we explore the opportunities to apply human performance principles to people changing the world for the better in the climate space, I think that conversation really has got us in a space that's sort of brings the best of our backgrounds to big problems that can help others, and that's really the most exciting stuff that we're involved in right now from my lens. But it's been great as a couple of episodes in the series to sort of talk about all this and share what we've learned. And we thank everybody for joining us. We hope this series has maybe opened up the aperture a little to the ways we approach human performance and our unique lens. The understanding about yourself as a sort of a springboard to becoming better at what you're trying to achieve, and some basic tools and principles there. And obviously, Benny and Jürgen, thanks as always for the unique and powerful lens you bring to this conversation, and allowing us to sort of dig deeper into these topics. And there's a lot more, and we hope to hit on a few more of these areas in the coming series. So thanks for listening, everybody.